Hello again and welcome to another edition of Newsmaker of the Week. I'm Leon Worden and I am pleased to welcome this week's Newsmaker from the city of Santa Clarita, the Environmental Services Manager, Travis Lange.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Now, Environmental Services Manager, I guess that's a fancy way of saying we're here to talk trash.
Among other things, yes.
Okay, and you know, I live right near the corner of Sierra Highway and Golden Valley Road in Newhall, which I guess some people all of a sudden lately are thinking that's in South Canyon country or something. But every day as I drive by there, I see this big sign that says, "Stop the dump." What dump?
Well, we have a commercial franchise with Burrtec Waste Industries, and as part of that franchise, they're supposed to build a materials recovery facility.
Materials recovery facility.
Yes.
It's the thing that people call MRF.
Exactly, MRF, MRF. And that happens to be close proximity to a site the most current site that they proposed for building the MRF.
MRF, dump?
Well, actually, MRFs are designed to prevent dumps, or prevent the need for dumps, if you will. Many times over the course of the last few weeks and for the whole history of the city, we've talked about Ellesmere Canyon, or practically the whole history of the city, we've talked about Ellesmere Canyon. And, you know, the fight that went on at that time to prevent a dump from going in right next to the city limits.
Right.
And part of that fight was to show the city's, part of that was to agree to be responsible for our waste and to do what we could to prevent the need for landfills. And a materials recovery facility is one of those types of facilities, the state-of-the-art facility at this time that can do that sort of thing.
So what is a MRF, if not a dump?
It's two portions. The MRF side of it, the materials recovery facility side of it, takes in recyclables. So when you put in your recyclable waste into your recycling bin at your residential home or at your business in a separate container, that would go to the MRF and be dumped on the ground inside a building and be put on a conveyor belt. And what I like to explain, it kind of looks like a Dr. Seuss book, all the different conveyor belts and all the different pieces of equipment. And at the end of it, you have nice cubes of glass in a certain color and plastic of a certain type and paper of a certain type, and you're able to ship that off to businesses that are able to reuse that material, so make new plastic bottles and things of that nature.
But it's not just the recyclable containers that are going to this thing. Isn't it the case that like all trash, all residential and commercial trash in the entire city of Santa Clarita would be going to this place?
Correct. Oftentimes, and always some component of it is a transfer portion of a MRF, meaning that as much as you educate people on what they can put in recycling bins and what they can't, you get some stuff that's in a recycling bin that's trash and you can't recycle. So that's what we call residual. And at the end of that, you got to ship that off to a landfill because it can't be recycled. On top of that, and this mainly gets to economies of scale and things of that nature, this facility would take all the trash, put it on the ground inside the facility, and put it into transfer trailers.
So split all the trash out on the ground and then magically sort it out somehow.
No, you don't sort the trash. The trash portion, the actual waste.
Okay, I was using trash to mean like everything.
Right, I understand.
But you're using trash to mean stuff that can't be recycled.
Recyclables over here, right? Yeah.
And yard waste fits in there somewhere.
And then yard waste could be, it's kept separate from those other materials because you put your yard waste into a separate container, and businesses will also encourage them to do that as well and get them those services. And then that would be transferred to a facility that actually can recycle that material and make it so that it can be reused, worked back into the ground in certain processes and things like that.
Okay. So have you been surprised about all this, excitement and angst from the residents?
Yes.
We've seen hundreds of people now at these council meetings.
Yeah. Yes and no. Some of it has been a surprise, but I understand people's concerns, especially when it's envisioned to be a dump and we're putting trash into the ground, and that's the last thing that we intend to do. Like I said before, it's really an attempt to be responsible for our trash and make sure, and our recyclables and our green waste and all the stuff that we throw away, to try and take care of the most responsible way so that there isn't as much of a need for a dump or a landfill as there was in the past. And a lot of it is getting the word out about what it is and what it isn't, and trying to explain to to citizens of what exactly this facility does and how it runs.
Now, where does this stand now? I mean, there was this site. Now, this site, tell me where this site is, this Burrtec's proposed site for the MRF.
Well, you actually gave a good location, Golden Valley Road, Sierra Highway. It's on the east side of Sierra Highway, south from Golden Valley Road. And
so between Sierra Highway and the freeway?
Essentially, but more closer to Sierra Highway. You wouldn't be able to see it from the freeway because it's down below a hillside. Okay. And it's a site that Burrtec proposed, the most recent site that they proposed. If you were watching the last council meeting on March 25th, you would have seen that the city manager, Ken Polskamp, explained the process, meaning if you own a piece of property and you put an application to do something with that piece of property, the city is legally required to entertain that application. So put it through the process and see whether or not it gets approved. There's no guarantee it gets approved or not.
Yeah, and I want to walk through that a little bit more slowly, but tell me right now where this thing stands.
Well, that's what I was getting at. So the mayor also asked to have a meeting with himself and members of Burrtec to talk about the concerns they've heard from the community and to basically talk about what are the next steps and what is the fate of this site. As it stands now, Burrtec hasn't taken away their application, meaning they still have an application in with planning to build a MRF, but all work on it. The work was being done on the EIR. A consultant was doing work. All that's been halted because Burrtec has requested it be halted.
Okay.
So what happens after?
So it's kind of sitting there on a shelf waiting for something to happen.
Exactly. And the discussion is about whether or not that application for that particular site stays on the shelf or if it gets withdrawn. And I don't know what will become of that conversation.
I want to go back a little bit chronologically here, start in about 2001 when it was learned that, I mean, there's this state law, AB 939, right? And that requires cities to do what?
It requires us to prevent 50% of the waste that we generate as a city from ever making it to a landfill. And the reason why I say prevent is whether or not you do that through recycling, people reuse things, people don't purchase things that require that much waste at the end of their life, all those sorts of processes, whatever it takes legally, obviously you can't burn trash anymore and things like that, but to prevent it from ever making it to a landfill is what you need to do. And at least 50% of your waste that they calculate to be generated by a city of this size and this amount of jobs, this tax base and that sort of thing, because it's all a mathematical equation, 50% of that needs to not make it to the landfill.
So that became law in 1989. And I think everything was going along fine, and we all thought that we were diverting half of our trash, and then lo and behold, like about 2001, we learned that, hey, whoa, wait a minute, we actually aren't diverting 50% of our trash. So all this big discussion ensued about, the city's role and what the trash companies were supposed to be doing and what they did or didn't do and all that. And we ended up with having some new trash contracts signed in 2003. Waste Management would handle all the residential trash and Burrtec would handle all the commercial trash. Who is Burrtec? I mean, Waste Management is like a big multinational company, but who's Burrtec?
They're not of the size of Waste Management, as you said, a big multinational company. I don't know the exact, size of the company or anything of the details of all.
They're just a Southern California operator? Or?
I believe they started here. I don't really know their complete history. They are a considerably, they're a good-sized trash hauling company, if you will. They own, actually operate, I believe, the most materials recovery facilities in Southern California at this time. They operate in mostly Riverside and San Bernardino. Is my understanding that's where their main operations are. They have a MRF down in Fontana, and they have recently come to town, as you had said. Their contract started in August of 2004 with us. And you're correct. I wasn't here. I wasn't at the city in the capacity I am now during what you had just explained about the trash situation and diversion and things of that nature. But I did come into this role about the time that we were going to negotiate the new franchises.
Okay, and in that new franchise then with Burrtec has a responsibility to build a MRF.
Right.
And the purpose of that is like you said, I mean, people aren't putting everything in the recycle bin that they should be putting in because they maybe don't know what all is recyclable, or they just don't do it or whatever. And so people left to their own devices, given 2 bins or 3 in the case that they have a yard trimmings bin, people just aren't able to do it enough to where city can meet the 50% requirement. Is that the deal?
Well, partly. I mean, I always say that we can put as many programs together as we possibly can and get all the support we've gotten from council for diversion. It really comes down to the decision that each person makes when they go to throw something away. And what there was a lot of different ways that were tried throughout the years in the trash business on how to meet recycling in this AB 939. And the one that seems to have stuck the most and be used the most is this commingled recycling bin. You get a separate recycling bin and you can put all your recyclables in there. You don't have to separate the paper into one and the plastic into another. That would be done at a facility such as the MRF. But the other thing that was tried for a while, and is still done in some places, but to less, it's not done as much, is you have one bin that has all the trash and all the recyclables in it. You mix the trash and recyclables in one bin, and that goes to a MRF, and it gets pulled out. We don't have that type of system. And it is true that the trash...
We don't now, but we would if we had a MRF.
No, we would not. We would not. That type of operation, you'd actually be picking through the trash to get out the recyclables. What this MRF is proposed to do is to deal with just the recyclables, the stuff that came out of that recycling bin. Now, you're going to have a small percentage.
But it all still goes to the facility.
Yep.
Everything.
It sure does.
Okay.
Yeah, it sure does. But it's two different parts of the facility. You have the trash that would go directly to the transfer station portion of it, not be touched or gone through by anybody or any machines, just pushed off into a transfer trailer, and the recyclables would go to the area where they got conveyor belts and machines and separate it all out. Because you can't have plastic with glass and things like that to get any value out of it. You got to separate that out. So the citizens actually are doing a good job of recycling. We can always do more, but this type of facility makes it so that their efforts don't go, they aren't wasted. The other thing that it does is it makes it so that as our waste stream changes, we're growing as a city, meaning not just in terms of buildings and things of that nature, but just we're changing, we evolve. And as we do that, our waste stream changes. It changes, and we're already seeing a little bit of that, changes from more construction and demolition in terms of weight, because that's how they measure it, to other types of waste, food waste, for instance, and things of that nature. As it stands now, we'd have to haul that stuff off to facilities that are outside the valley, considerably outside the valley, places like Sun Valley. And we don't have as much control over the way that gets processed, whether or not it does. We can't make requests of them. Whereas if we built something here under the franchise agreement, we have a lot more control over that.
Right. So it's to help the city make sure it's meeting the AB 939 requirement, and to do more recycling, and to help the environment and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So in the Burrtec trash contract, which was, I think, signed in November 2003 and took effect in 2004, one of the things in there is it says that the MRF shall be under construction in a certain date in 2005, and it shall be completed by February 2006.
Right.
Why didn't that happen?
Well, this is actually the third site that Burrtec has put in an application or started the process with the city to intend to build the MRF on. The first site...
There were EIRs started on other things?
No, we didn't get to that point, but there was other intents. One of the first location was basically over at Bouquet Junction, where Bouquet and Valencia Boulevard, right where it turns into Soledad, and it was right there at the corner, but close to it. Just down from there, in the old Kaiser Century property.
Oh, okay, right, that's right.
Vicinity.
Okay, yeah, I remember that now.
And
I remember the discussion.
That process.
Yeah, what happened with that?
Yeah, that process went on for quite some time. We've even had some community meetings about that site, and really what made everyone stop there and Burrtec to step back was that they couldn't get permission to cross the railroad tracks. And the alternative, which was some type of undercrossing or overcrossing, was just not gonna be feasible.
Too expensive.
Yeah, and just maybe not even feasible at that point.
Okay.
So, but yes, expense was a big factor in that. And so they started looking for other sites.
And I wanna take a quick break, and I wanna come back and I wanna talk about those other sites.
Okay.
Howdy, friends. It's time to dust off your boots and head on over to the city of Santa Clarita's annual Cowboy Festival. The Old West comes alive. As you walk down the streets of the Melody Ranch Motion Picture Studio, there'll be non-stop entertainment all weekend with nationally renowned musicians and cowboy poets. Get fitted up with authentic cowboy gear and taste the best cowboy grub in the West. So come on out to the historic Melody Ranch Motion Picture Studio in the rustic hills of Santa Clarita.
We're back with Travis Lange from the city of Santa Clarita talking about trash, talking about this materials recovery facility, or MRF. And where we left off, you were talking about Burrtec looking for there were 3 sites, and Burrtec was looking for a second site. What was the second one they looked at?
It was the Gates King development that had already been approved, and it was a portion of it, obviously, because that project is much larger than just the MRF site would require. And that actually...
That's south, kind of the south end of Newhall, basically behind if you look at Eternal Valley,
exactly.
It's all that area behind there.
Exactly, exactly. And it was right along, very close to Sierra Highway, on the west side of Sierra Highway. And
farther away from anybody's houses.
Yeah, yes, it was. And it was actually approved by the Planning Commission. It got appealed at that point to the council, but it had been approved, at least gotten that far through the process through the Planning Commission. And then the litigation that was already associated with that development prior to the MRF being proposed there, things happen, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know the details of it, but steps happened. It made all the parties feel, the city, Burrtec, the developer that owns the property, feel like it just wasn't going to happen.
So that's the Lynn Plambeck lawsuit against Mark Gates and the Gate King project.
You know, I don't know the exact names on it. I know that it is part of the environmental community that was concerned about certain aspects of that project. And the MRF kind of got slowed down in that process because that litigation didn't pan out, and so eventually there was further discussions about, okay, where do we go next, or where does Burrtec go next? And throughout this, Burrtec is proposing sites and Burrtec's looking for sites, but the city is also at least helping them in terms of where are their vacant properties, city, where are their places, where are things zoned, like, okay, great. But then at the end of the day, they look at those maps, they look at those lists, and they do their own research, and I'm sure that they have their own real estate people that are going out and taking a look, and they propose a site. We come to the present day site that's, like I said, the application's on the shelf and all work's been halted at this time.
And I remember a couple of council meetings ago, Councilman Tim Ben Boydston saying, well, they just didn't go out and buy property like on a lark. I mean, they must have worked with city staff to identify this site, didn't they? Oh,
well, there was talk about, like I said, from a general standpoint of, can you help us identify where there are empty, pieces of property? Can you help us with the zoning? Can you help us with, different aspects of it? And then when they get to the point where, okay, we've looked at all these properties, and for whatever reason, these didn't work because there wasn't a willing seller, which happened often. This isn't going to work because we found other issues with the site when they did their own research, and it's not going to be timely. And then they come to a site that they feel is the best choice at that time, and then we talk about it, and then you start the process. And through the process, and remember, we're just at the very beginning of it, and you want to see whether or not it's going to be feasible.
I mean, they actually purchased this land. Right?
Yeah.
They own the property, so they must have had the idea that it would have been okay.
Right,
I guess.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, If it was supposed to be open and operating in 2006, I mean, are there any kind of penalties against Burrtec?
We've actually had 3 amendments already on the date of that. The current date, yes.
Extended.
As you said, it was supposed to break ground or start construction April 2005 and then be built and operational February 2006. It's now January 1st, 2009, and then open and operational November 1st of 2009.
Okay.
So
those are just going to get delayed until...
It's a possibility. It's a possibility.
What if it doesn't happen at all? Then where are we?
Well, delay. I mean, it's a possibility. It can
And delayed, because every neighborhood you try to put it in isn't going to work. I mean, what happens if we come to... I think the contract expires in 2013, which sounds like it's far away, but it's already 2008, if you can believe that. So, I mean, it's not... we're only talking 5 years, and if you can't, in 5 years, find a neighborhood that's willing to accept this thing, then it never happens. What happens if it never happens?
I'm still optimistic that we can make it happen. And when I say that, make it happen with the community's involvement. One of the things that's come out of this is there's been a lot of talk. I've had a lot of conversations with the community and the concerned citizens about recycling. And most of the people I've talked to, they understand the importance of recycling. They want to have a discussion about where it goes. And I think that Burrtec's heard that loud and clear, and that discussion needs to be had.
Would you have done things differently, a few months ago if we had known all this was going to fall apart like this?
I would always do things differently in terms of, meaning that I always go back and try and see different ways to do things to see how it could be even more successful next time, even things that are successful.
One thing, I gotta jump in there with something. I'm thinking that if you were to put out a public notice, fax it to the local newspaper and post it in the library and whatever. It says, the city of Santa Clarita will hold a community meeting about a MRF on this and such a project, on this and such a site. I mean, you get the same 5 people coming to a meeting like that, who always come to a meeting when the city posts a notice about something that nobody ever heard of. So I guess now people know what a MRF is, but I mean, realistically, how would you have done anything different, You got some magic thing to bring out people when you...
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's why I say that to some extent it's a good thing, because people are talking about recycling and we have an opportunity to educate people about recycling and tell them what it is and what it isn't and things along those lines. But yeah, there's a certain amount of truth to what you just said, and obviously certain people did find out about it because we've gotten people heavily involved. And I was actually at the meeting where we discussed the fact that the houses were outside of the legal limit where we needed to post it, but we said, well, wait a second though, we need to make sure that, these houses that we know are the closest do get a notice of some kind.
So did the ones if you're looking at the site and you look up and you see some houses that are on the basically the freeway side of Sierra Highway.
Right.
I mean, did they get a notice in the mail before the EIR thing started and all that, or?
Actually, my understanding that is a member of planning actually went there and walked door to door and handed out to the ones that he knew were gonna. And when I say see it, based on their site plan that they had, they would only see the driveway of it, not the actual facility.
Yeah. What does? Okay. Let's whether it goes there or not. What does this thing look like?
Well, actually, the pictures that I've seen, the simulations, if you will.
Does it look like a dump?
No. It looks like a fairly large building. I mean, we're talking about 160,000 square feet. 80,000 square feet for the MRF side of it, 40,000 for the transfer, with an option to expand it to another 40,000, so it'll be 80,000 on each side. And I don't know what I compare it to, a very large Lowe's, if you will. I mean, if you're talking about from the street,
building or whatever.
Yeah, but with all the amenities to try and cut back on just having a big square box, if you will. Architectural things and things along those lines. The other thing that was beneficial is that the doors for bringing in the trucks were on the opposite side, so you wouldn't be able to see them from the street and things like that. And really, with any site that's proposed, those are the sorts of things that are looked at.
And it's going to have what? Something like 800 trash truck trips. How many trash truck trips?
You know, that's a part that we haven't gotten to because we haven't done that part of the EIR, the traffic study and things along those lines. At this point in time, I can
Where
tell.
those numbers come from, the people are saying in council, there's going to be like 811, or I forget how many, but trash trucks, and then like 150 of the big, huge semis.
Yeah, I think that I don't know exactly where they got the calculations from. I know that at the EIR meeting, I explained that we have about 10 commercial vehicles, so meaning 10 vehicles that pick up for commercial in the city, and there's about 40 that pick up for residential. And then there are others.
Regular trash trucks.
Yes, and then there are others like temporary bin and roll-off, people that have roll-off franchises and they have their own trucks, and I don't know the number of those, and that would be something that would come out of the traffic study, how many would actually make it to this facility. And then the transfer trucks, and probably one of the rules of thumb they were able to use is that about 2.5 to 3 regular trash trucks fit into a transfer trailer. So you can kind of figure out how many you think are going to pick up in the city and come up with some type of estimate. Whether or not 800 is the right one or not, I don't know.
And then they would be driving, all day, I guess, across town over to Chiquita landfill and dumping the trash
now.
Right?
Yeah, some of them do that, and some of them go up to AV. In some cases, it doesn't make sense to drive from one end of town to go to the landfill on the other side of town. And that was the other thing that would be part of the study is how many trucks that were actually servicing the west side of town would spend the time to drive across the valley to go to the Smurf, or just, if they're hauling trash, just go directly to the landfill.
So is this a viable site?
At this point in time, I haven't seen projects of this nature be halted as this one was, and have the applicant really stop at this stage and make statements along the lines of, hey, we've heard what the community has to say, we want to hear further from the community, we want to make a good decision, so we're going to keep our application in until we figure all out what this all means. But they've really, I think, stopped and listened, and now whatever comes out of that meeting between the city and Burrtec representatives, I wouldn't be surprised if it is, not put at this site.
Is the city manager going to be asking Burrtec to withdraw its application?
My understanding from that meeting was that the mayor wanted to talk to them about that option. I mean, we can't, like we already mentioned, we can't go in and say, this is what you're going to do, because it's not in the contract in that fashion. But we can say,
even though you end up owning the MRF at some point.
We can. It's an option.
Okay.
We don't have to. It's an option. And I can tell you that there's already been discussions that I've already had Burrtec call me and ask me about, tell me that they're looking for alternative sites.
I was going to say, are you helping them now, trying to identify some sites?
We haven't, nothing.
Where would be a good place for this thing?
Exactly.
Where
I
would
don't
be a
know.
good place for this?
I don't know. And that's why we start with the process. I mean, when you find a site that Burrtec is comfortable enough with putting an application for, the work on other sites stops and they focus on that site because it takes a lot of time and energy to do that. Now that this has been halted and things have slowed down with it, there's talk about, okay, well, what are the alternatives? What are some of the things? And people have, I know the community has mentioned it to me more than one occasion that they want to put it out by the dump. And, lots of people have different ideas about where they want to put the MRF, and we'll see.
We got to wrap it up, but I mean, the city is committed to having a MRF inside city limits, right?
Well, as it stands now, the franchise doesn't say it's in or outside the city. I think what I know we're committed to is working through the franchise, working with Burrtec, and trying to make sure that we protect our ability to handle our own trash here in the valley. And that's for economics as well. As landfills close, trash rates are going to go up. And if we have to haul these things out of the valley, rates are going to go pretty high.
And right now, if you took it to a MRF, I mean, where is the closest MRF?
Well, right now, some of our stuff's going to Burbank, some of our stuff's going to Sun Valley.
And it does actually go there? Okay.
But you're talking about trash trucks to drive down there, so you need more trash trucks, which cost more money for the residents. I mean, that turns into rates. We're lucky right now because we have a very council negotiated an excellent franchise with the haulers. Their rates are very good rates.
The rate was much better than it used to be.
Yeah, when you compare them to the county and you compare them to what we've seen change. But as you already mentioned, 2013, the contracts are up, and that's not that far away.
Right.
And there's a whole new ballgame, and if we don't have the ability to control our own destiny, then we're going to have to deal with that at that time.
Tough issue. Travis Lange, thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining us. If you missed any portion of this program, you can see it again and again on scvtv.com. Check back here, channel 20 Sunday 8:30 a.m., Thursday 9 p.m. for another Newsmaker of the Week.